No. Good morning. Hello.
Hello. Is this
Hello?
on? Hello. Welcome. Okay, so for those of you who are eagerly awaiting to share your answers for the sushi,
Three, two,
go
one.
ahead in 3, 2, 1, go.
Now
Well
I'm
done.
now I'm focusing on it, and I'm extra hungry.
Yeah, super extra hungry. Really good. Okay. Amazing. Okay, so for those of you that would like to be able to compare back and forth, now that we're all sort of writing on top, what I'll do is I will clear and then I will show you the actual answers because I'm sure you're just dying to know. There you go. There are all the answers. 9 differences.
One of those things. 9 of those things.
9
is
of
not
those things.
Like the other.
Okay.
9 of those
Good.
things is not
Good.
the same.
Okay, cool. We're just practicing our following instructions and playing together nicely. Tool use, that's great. Just a little reminder on as we get close, actually we'll talk about this afterwards as we get closer to the topic test. Some reminders about sort of the use of collaborative spaces. We'll go over that again.
Oh my God, Zoom, I hate you.
Okay, ready?
Yeah, we're not really ready. Well,
We're not really
ready.
ready?
We're still discussing.
Yeah, okay. But we can move on.
Yeah. So this is a reminder. You might see the shirts that we're wearing. It's Wednesday. We realize that. However, this is the last time we're going to be face to face, kind of, with you. And so we wanted to take a chance to let you know about these 2 specific celebrations. The wrong word.
Commemoration?
Commemoration is the right word.
Observance?
Observance is even a better word. For the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. There's one that CBS, the college that many of you are a member of, that we are a member of, is holding just outside of the Summerlee Science Complex. If you're on campus, it's just in that area, the curve, the inside of the curve of the building by the tree and the flower beds. They'll be meeting there at 10 for that tomorrow. And if you can't make that, there's a longer one that's going on Johnson Green between 12 and 2 o'clock. And these are tomorrow for the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. If you haven't, and I'm sure you have, but go to the next slide, there's an easy applet that you can go to that the CBC put out a couple of years ago. If you're curious about residential school, the history, the horrible history of residential schools in Canada, it's not an old thing. This clearly shows you the map, but one of the things about this applet that it can do is if you enter in when you were born and where you are, go one more slide ahead, it'll tell you where the closest residential school was to where you're sitting and when it closed. And I think one of the things that people all across the country find out when they do this, well, some, let's say, settler people find out when they do this, is that it was going on when I was in high school. And I know I'm old, but that's really not that long ago. Scars. All right.
Yeah. And it's
Answers.
really important to be engaged in this conversation and to be thinking about it regularly.
We'll put the links in the
we
chat.
talk about it as a day, and this is the first day, but absolutely this needs to be an ongoing conversation as well as ongoing acts towards truth and reconciliation. As somebody who has a horrible genocide in their cultural past, I can tell you that even within groups of people who have been targeted for genocide, there is difference and there is privilege, which to me is an incredibly uncomfortable thing to think about and to say. And so all of us must be part of this as we work towards a better future. And remembering the past and the horrible things that we were all involved in or adjacent to is important. I've had discussions with my parents, for example, who were my age at a time when all of this was going on, and certainly when we think about being sort of next to or witness of genocide. It's an incredibly difficult thing for them to talk about, but it's important to get them to understand what was going on at the time that they were vibrant adults within the community. Okay. So
some of those, you'd asked for some of those links in the chat. I have put some of those links in the chat.
Great.
I'm seeing that somebody's asking, is it really glitchy for anyone else? And I presume that means us in the video.
I hope not.
I hope not. Yeah.
And we are recording.
Yes, we are.
So
Good.
it will not. Yes. So it will not be glitchy.
Well, look at those arrows, just by chance, where they're pointing.
Yeah.
Why am I simple but wrong? I've never been accused of. Well, I've been accused of being wrong. Like in press, I've been accused of it, but simple, hardly ever.
I fully support the directionality of those arrows.
I can show you the citation that says, what was it, complex and incomplete?
That's right. You were complex and incomplete.
Isn't that what we can all just aspire to?
Yeah. Okay, so talking about the first topic test that is coming up, these are consistent and repeated reminders that it is coming up on October 8th. From 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. is when it is scheduled to be open.
Wait, does it take that long?
No, it does not take this long. So we offer our course in what is called universal design. It means that we make it as accessible and as inclusive as possible. So as flexible as we can possibly make it is what we try to do. So you will have not only a big window within which to decide when you want to write your test, but then you will have triple time. Every student will have triple time. So the test is not 3 hours.
It should not.
It should not take 3 hours. But if you feel like you need 3 hours, you can have 3 hours, but only 3 hours. So if you would like a full 3 hours, you need to sign in 3 hours before the closing time. Okay, so you need to sign in by 3 p.m. If you realize that you've completely forgotten to sign in and it's 4 p.m., do not panic. You will not need 3 hours, but we just give you that 3 hour window. So the thing is, though, that Friday, October 8th, is the beginning of, I think, anyway, the Thanksgiving weekend, right? And so what we're wondering is, we're not going to say yes until we hear from you. What we're wondering is, would some of you like the opportunity to write the test between noon and 6 p.m. on Thursday, October 7th? So now you can't write it after 6 p.m. We're going to close it. And the reason why we're going to close it is because we don't want people writing it at midnight, because if you have questions for us, we will not be awake. So
like guaranteed.
Guaranteed. So between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m., if you want to write it then, stamp in the box. If you want to write it on Friday between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., stamp in that box, please. Okay, that's great. Okay, so
Wait,
enough.
could we do both?
Yeah, let's do both.
Wow.
Please do both. Some people have work.
Somebody has work.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have work at noon. I can't do noon to 6.
So, but on Friday?
On
Between
Friday,
9
I can do 9
and 6,
a.m.
Yeah. Okay, good. So, great. This is great. So what we're going to do...
We got you.
Yeah. Universal
Not
design.
Not at work. We're not going to cover your shift.
Yeah.
Although
Okay.
that'd be fun.
That would be
Tell us
fun.
where you work. We might be horrible.
We would do a shitty job.
What did you just say, and what did it translate it as?
Okay.
Oh, we do a job.
We do a job. Okay.
Oh, Google.
This is great. Okay, so some of you would like the opportunity to write it on Thursday between noon and 6 p.m. But don't put a big box over top of everyone's answers. Okay, and then others of you will still want to write it on Friday. That's perfect. So what we're going to do is we are going to open up the test on Thursday at noon until 6 p.m. Okay? You cannot write it after 6 p.m. We will close it down. And then we will open it up again on Friday at 9 until 6 p.m. So all we're doing is we're opening up another block. We're allowed to do this. We wouldn't be able to change the date or the time because I think it's in the course outline. And maybe it isn't. Anyway, doesn't matter. We wouldn't do that to you. But we'll open it up early, okay?
There's a bunch of chats in the chat
Yeah.
about asking whether there's a lockdown browser or Respondus. And of course, we can say very emphatically, no! Not in our courses ever. Shouldn't be ever.
So, in many respects, Respondus is a direct counter to all of the things that we are trying to do as we engage in anti-racist and truth and reconciliation conversations. Respondus
it's like Thanos.
Is a absolutely terrible piece of software
off.
that discriminates against people. We hate it. And what we will tell you, though, is that in order to be able to do these things authentically, we need you to take responsibility as well. So these are meant to be done independently. You cannot post questions, you cannot ask for answers or anything like that on any of the Discord or the Facebook or the whatever it is that you have. You're totally allowed to use those things to talk to each other about like legit course thing, no problem. But if there is any academic misconduct, because a lot of that is done anonymously, it's not possible to talk directly to the people responsible. So we will have to then change the way that we do things in order to ensure that academic misconduct doesn't happen. We get watched quite deliberately by the administration. For some reason, we have a reputation and they think that we're all like floofy and floppy and like easy. And so it's really important that we make sure that we do authentic assessments because I think they're the right way to do them. And the more authentic they are, the more likely they will spread to other courses. Okay? Great. Okay, so we will post an announcement about this add-on of time so that you can see it written down on the announcements page in CourseLink.
Yeah, and so watch that homepage, that announcements page. We'll have lots and more reassuring updates.
Yeah. As we get closer, we'll let you know what we're thinking for the format. As we get closer, we'll let you know all of those things. We'll launch the asynchronous study tool and all of that.
Yeah, and there's a common kind of reoccurring one. I'm not kind of bringing up all of the specifics, but one of the reoccurring ones is it open book? And just following along what Dr. Jacobs just said. So yes, it's open book. You can have your notes, you can have the internet, but to use in a way that as an active part of your brain, not as in a way that's reminiscent of academic misconduct.
That's right. Yeah. So yes, you can talk to each other about like what time was the test and somebody can help you or whatever. But as soon as you start asking questions about the actual questions or what the answers might be, that's when you're getting into unapproved territory. Oh, you're very welcome. That's what so please, if you have a challenge that we're not accounting for in our design, let us know and we will make it better for all of you. Okay.
Will we need to upload a file of written answers?
I think so.
Or it's in the box, I think.
There's going to be some drawing. But don't worry yet. Do not worry.
Yeah.
We got you. It's okay. Somebody asked if they can email us with questions. Yes, that's why we have it during sort of business hour time so that we are there and able to answer questions. You can email the course email address, but we have all of that. It will all be there for you. It's all good.
No, somebody says, too late, I'm worrying, and they shouted it. So we're going to insist now.
Don't worry.
No worrying. Stop it.
It will be okay. Okay, good. Now, shall we get to the course stuff?
Oh, they're not shouting anymore.
They're not shouting anymore?
Now
okay.
They're singing Gloria Gaynor. That's what I hear when you write that.
Okay.
Are we talking about anything else?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, actually, a lot of
like
things.
A lot of stuff. So we're going to have to go extra fast.
Zip, zip,
No.
zip, 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 zip.
We may have to cut out some stuff at the end. But
Not the insects.
oh, the insects. We're racing towards the insects, and Smith is nervous. So, here we go. You had a homework question. Now, this is the exact same question. So, I'm literally going to give you a minute to click in. Because we have to go and do other things. So, here you go. What answer did you come up with? Share it, please, not on the slide, but on the polling question thing that I just sent to you. Oh, I didn't delete the choice 3, choice 4 thing. Sorry. It's a little bit messy.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yes, give it up for the bugs. Give it up for the insects. Here's a little song I wrote.
Might want to sing it note for note.
Don't worry.
Be happy.
No respondus.
Wonderful.
Everybody be happy.
That's so good. Okay. Just another few more seconds. Get your answers in. And because we are running out of time, and because I know that you can figure out where you went wrong, we're just going to share with you what the correct answer is, and then you can go to the discussion board, or you can go to your own social media stuff to talk about why it was that correct answer. That's totally fine. So here we go. End poll. 34% of you got the answer correct. So well done. The answer is E. It is not supported, right? Remember, biology, gray, so you don't always know for sure, but you do know what hypotheses are supported or not supported by data. So species B is most certainly more successful at reproducing than species A. It is not supported because they're both extant. They are both successful at reproducing, and complexity doesn't necessarily mean better. If you think about our ability to reproduce and you think about bacteria's ability to reproduce, bacteria kick our butt at reproduction. So that's the answer for that. But please go through each one and come out with a statement for why it is supported, and what kind of different concepts we're pulling together in order to write those statements.
A quick thing about interjection from some of the comments about one common error that happens when you're doing these kinds of multiple choice or true-false tests is read the question. Reread the question as well. So probably go with your first impression, but as you're kind of going through the test again before you submit, press submit, reread the question to make sure you haven't missed a not. Or a false. A directionality in the question.
Yeah. Okay. So back to...
And now we're done. So
No.
thanks. See you next, have a great thing.
Oh my goodness. We have a lot to think about as we try to understand how to interpret trees, to understand what they tell us, and also to understand what they can't tell us. So
wait, are we listening to the trees today?
We are listening to the trees.
I like it. We are the Lorax.
Yeah, so we're going to 2.0 this tree thinking stuff. And we're going to bump it up a little bit now that we've covered the basics from the previous lecture.
Class.
Yeah, so we can ask ourselves, when did an adaptation evolve in a lineage? And you can, in some cases, put a date to that, or at least a date or time period. Wednesday. But what's easier to do, and a little bit more obvious, is to look at it relative to the evolution of other traits, right? If we can do that, then we can start to understand kind of which came first, or which more likely came first. So we can do that by doing what's called a phylogenetic analysis of trait evolution, right? Just by looking at the different traits and trying to figure out a story. And we can plot these on a tree, okay? The big questions are, of course, has the trait evolved independently? And if so...
I'm not helping.
You're not helping.
I am really helping. So we're going to add a couple of things to your quiver of words today, and you've seen them in some of the pre-readings. But basically, when we're interested in trait evolution and the phylogenetic hypotheses involved in trait evolution, the big question is it a trait that's inherited from a common ancestor? So we call that a homologous trait or homology, or is it one that's evolved because of some strict environmental constrict Like, there's only one way to be this way. And so evolution sometimes comes up with independent solutions. And that one we called homoplasy. So the independent evolution of a trait. So a trait can be homologous or homoplasious. And your ability as a biologist, though, as a biodiversity scientist, or as an evolutionary biologist, is to understand kind of the consequences of these hypotheses.
Yeah, they are hypotheses. In some cases, they are pretty easy to figure out which one it is. Like, for example, flight. If you consider flight to be a trait, it's like a big, massive trait, though. But if you consider flight to be a trait, and then you take a look at all of the organisms that fly, so bees, for example, birds, bats, so mammals, birds, and insects, they all fly. Very unlikely that they all shared a common ancestor who flew. It's way more likely that these are independent evolutions of flight, and you can support that by looking at the way in which they can actually fly is just very different. So those are independent. Whereas if they had a common ancestor who flew, and then the way in which they fly is pretty much maintained throughout the tree, then that would be a homology or homologous trait.
There's also the consequences about if it was shared, then we all would express it potentially. So there's a whole bunch of there's consequences
That's
to
right.
to your thinking of this trait evolution, plotting traits on trees.
And if we all had it from a common ancestor, but then some of us don't, some of us may have lost it.
No.
I know. So this is complex. So let's dive into this a little bit because it's really kind of cool. If you're into logic thinking and on all of that stuff, it's really quite neat.
And there's someone who's asking about, are we talking about convergent evolution or is it related? This is that's another
Ding, ding,
phrase
ding,
for
ding,
that
ding.
homoplasious
That's right.
trait.
That's right.
Is convergent evolution.
Yeah. So this is a tree, and it's a true tree. And what we've mapped on the different branches at the different nodes is the evolution of some pretty important traits that define the subsequent clade. So there are multiple clades here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at least clades in this particular tree, and each kind of clade is defined by the evolution of that trait. That happens just before the common ancestor, okay? And you can kind of go up and go, okay, all of these are vertebrates, yep. And then all of these have bony skeletons, cool. And then from amphibians across, they have forelimbs and amniotic eggs, and you can kind of go in and it's all nicely resolved and it feels all super, super great, super comfortable, right? Okay, it gets more complex than this, but this is just kind of understanding how we can apply the traits to the different trees. Mm-hmm. How do we apply that to muscles? So we want to put your brains in an uncomfortable spot. So this is like a kind of warning, content warning. You will be uncomfortable for the next little while trying to wrap your brain around this, because it's like a thing, like taxonomists and people that try to understand, evolutionary biologists.
Phylogenetic systematists.
Phylogenetic systematists.
That did really good.
Well done. Are uncomfortable all the time trying to think about these
That's why
things.
they're often grumpy.
Okay, so muscles in the Great Lakes. Here are multiple species that are there. That are different, but probably related in some way, right? So trying to figure out how they do that is super difficult. So let's make it a little bit easier. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you 6 species of muscles, and we're going to ask you to kind of use your brain uncomfortably to walk through a bit of an evolutionary story. To walk through an evolutionary story, okay? So if you need some pen, like a pen and paper, or you want to just open up a notepad on your screen, it would be helpful to actually go in and do this in some way. So imagine that you've got 6 species of muscles that are differentiated only by 2 traits, okay? So they are different species, but the only difference between them are 2 traits. One of them is color and the other is shell shape. Right? We've been dealing with this stuff for a little while.
Shell shape. By the seashore.
By shell shape. Okay, so what we'd love for you to do is to try to draw a possible resolved evolutionary tree that describes the relationship between these muscles. So try to draw a tree, right? Like you can either do it the square one or the triangular one. It's called triangular?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. Great. So go ahead and give that a shot.
What are these weird circles? The circles. What are the weird circles? The weird circles are the shells.
These are the shells.
These are muscles. So groups of triplets of 3 samples or 3 specimens per species. And so the challenge for you is to try and draw a phylogenetic relationship between them when there's a difference in 2 traits, in shape and color.
Yep.
And you, of course, can see the U as I say that word. Even though, oh, it does. Good.
It does.
Nice. Oh, the shell-shaped redemption.
Okay.
Why am I blanking on the movie? Shawshank, right. There's a
Shawshank.
whole bunch of Shawshank before there's any redemption.
Shh, they're working.
Oh yeah, spoiler
Yeah.
alert.
Okay.
Sure, you can model them as pistachios. If you really, like if you're allergic to shellfish, they're pistachios.
Okay. So try to do this. It is not easy. It will help you understand what phylogenetic trees look like and the implications and the consequences of all of these things.
There's
Okay?
questions about this shape. We've simplified it here, right?
Yeah.
So there are just 2, like narrow, squat, and
No,
color.
there are
There are
3.
3?
There
Oh,
are
I thought-
3 shell shapes
Oh, I see.
and
There's an intermediate. Yeah.
3 colors. But it doesn't matter. Make 4 shapes, 4 colors. It doesn't matter. Just try to struggle with this. Okay.
If we could all become Morgan Freeman, then.
Yeah. Okay. So
Ah.
this is not easy. And what do we have?
How do we know who was first?
How do we know who was first?
That's a great question.
Brilliant. Okay. So how many of you, if you want to just stamp on the left-hand side of the screen, and then we'll get the others to do it on the right-hand side. So how many of you, if you started thinking about color first, stamp on the left-hand side of the screen. If you started thinking about shape first, stamp on the right-hand side of the screen. Perfect. That's great. Okay.
Oh, I like
Nice.
this. Is awesome.
This is great. There's no right answer.
But there is.
But there is?
Yeah.
But well, okay. More importantly, for those of you that started with color first, that grouped the green ones together, right? Grouped the red ones together, grouped the blue ones together. What does that imply about shell shape? If you started with color, what does that imply about shell shape? Or if you started with shape, what does that imply about color?
Unless I'm reading into this wrong, and sorry for unmuting myself, is it something to do with how they were, like, maybe genetic drift, and or like they got cut off from the rest and then developed differently?
Nope.
Okay, I was gonna say it was like a
Thank you for trying. Yeah, no, that's
great. Just gotta
great.
throw it out there. My bad.
Yep. No, that's okay. So what does that imply about the other? If you start with one, what does it imply about the other? Any ideas?
The other isn't important.
Okay, that's not bad. Let's start with that one. The other one isn't important. It is important, but it's more easily changeable. Right? So if you grouped all of the blue ones together, and then you grouped all of the red ones together, and then you grouped all of the green ones together, it means that shell shape, right, is more easily changeable and that it evolves independently. Okay? We'll show you what that means, but just kind of hold on to that. Do you want to add anything there? No? You're good? Okay. Okay. And now, recognizing, of course, that species aren't differentiated by 2 traits alone. We can add more traits and go, oh my goodness, this is complex now, right? We're adding a 3rd trait, and that is lure shape, right? Where we have simple lures like in number 2 and number 4, and then more complex, larger lures in number 1, 5, 6, and 3. Now try to do a tree, and you can do that when you're studying, right? You can take these and you can try to build a tree that resolves and understand what the implications are for each of the traits depending upon the way that you do it. And adding more traits, of course, we can add the fish hosts to these different species and recognize that traits sometimes aren't contained within the individual organism's body, but rather the ecological relationship that they have to other species. That can be a trait, right? And so this is complicated. There's a lot of things going on as we try to identify the evolutionary relationships among species. And I hope you're going like, oh my goodness, I can't do a tree. That's too much, Baby Bell cheese. Yes, it's too much. It's a lot, right? And so the way that we, tease through these things, it takes years, decades, all sorts of fancy tools. And being a phylogenetic systematist is like a real job. Somebody struggles with these things all the time. Okay?
I've been typing something, an answer to a question here about, because what do you start with has come up several times. And you, of course, you don't know, because right when we've talked about in time, we're not saying, Wednesday. Remember when that happened in evolution?
Yeah.
And so basically, you won't know as a phylogenetic systematist or just as a biodiversity scientist or an evolutionary biologist. And so what you do is you try each way.
Yeah.
And then you evaluate the trees, because the trees that you're going to be drawing are hypotheses. And those hypotheses will have more or fewer consequences. And that's one way that you evaluate your hypothesis.
That's right. So just taking a look at these ecological relationships with these mussels, right? We can make some conclusions, right? We can say that those with simple lures attract more species of fish, right? And they also attract the same species of fish from one species with simple lure to another species of simple lure. So there's the same color and shape of fish, right? So representing the species of fish. Whereas the more complex lures attract very specific species of fish, right? Now, the total number of fish that each of those attract may be the same, right? Because if it is a complex lure that is sort of evolved to attract one specific fish, it probably attracts more of those individual specific fish than the simple lure here would attract of this particular fish species. That's the whole connection to it not necessarily being better at reproducing, because they are both able to attract fish, right? Anyway, this kind of like all ties into like the ecology and all of those things, and it's a lot, and it's really cool.
And it's kind of 2 free study questions.
There you go. So let's imagine that this is the resolved tree. It can be resolved in different ways, but let's just imagine that this is the resolved tree where we have simple lures, red, different shell shape, a clade of large lures here, right? That then differentiate by color and then by shell shape. Okay, so let's just imagine that that's the order, right? So we start first with color, and then we go into lure, and then we go into shell shape. And color and lure tend to go together, okay? I hope that you can see how we've resolved that tree. Let's throw a question at you to try to answer it.
Somebody wants goldfish crackers now.
Goldfish crackers, yeah. We can go through you want to skip the birds.
No, the birds are great.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah. They're tasty. I was just about to do what they were doing on the Olympics, the election coverage. Start thinking about, the returns are showing, it's like 9 people.
Yeah. We better figure out this answer.
Imagine. Zoom. I did just say birds are tasty.
So about 60% have filled it out. That's great. Go ahead. We'll give you another minute or so.
Oh, I forgot. There's a parrot listening. Not all birds.
Not all birds. Okay. A few more seconds. Go ahead and get your answers in.
I did not know that.
What's that?
The parrot smells delicious after he eats cinnamon.
Oh, amazing. Okay. And we'll give it a 10-second. Okay, well done. Great. So I will share the results with you, and the answer is C. That is supported by the evolutionary tree. That's there. But remember, there are things that can be supported and things that are not supported, right? And so what we want you to do is, if you got it wrong here, no worries, because we just went through this stuff. You haven't even had time to learn it yet. That's totally fine. But use it as an opportunity to now work through the different answers for why they are supported or why they are not supported. And what you can do is then you can take the ones that are not supported, rewrite them so that they are supported. And that will hopefully allow you to understand how trees can be interpreted. Okay? We're going to give you all the tools that you need to do that. Not to worry. So, study, practice. All other statements, what other statements could you reliably make, right? About the different relationships between the different traits. Post your answers on the discussion board if you want, or your social media boards, or whatever. We can make this part of the asynchronous tool too.
Or use it as take this as kind of a template with your study group, with your friends that you're studying with, to be like, okay, I'm gonna figure out a question about this tree.
Yeah.
You're gonna figure out a question about this tree. We're gonna ask each other, et cetera, et cetera, and then that gives you confidence to go out and find other trees in the literature, the interpipes, and then do the exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Way better, actually, once you kind of get it, to go out and find a tree you've never seen before and do the same thing.
Hug it.
Hug it. Hug a tree. Okay.
So one of the complex things that comes about, a consequence of thinking about trait evolution and homologous, whether they're homologous, derived from the common ancestor, or homoplasius, derived via convergent evolution to strict environmental conditions, is thinking about whether traits can be lost. And there was actually a law in biology that Dolo expressed, D-O-L-L-O. Dolos Law is that once you've lost a complex thing, you can't regain it. But picture this. All right, then this is, imagine this. Okay, so in the beginning, there was an ancestral trait of being not colored in. And in one lineage that split off, one group of species, one clade, the ancestral trait was maintained. They were not colored in. However, in the other lineage, the other sister taxa, a derived trait evolved, and it became filled in. Now, further along evolution, remember time is moving up on the screen here, a couple of those daughter taxa the derived state of being colored in is maintained. So it's the more recently ancestral, but we'll call it the derived state in terms of the context of this slide. But what were to happen if you were to observe then the appearance in one of the taxa of that ancestral trait again? Might you conclude that the derived trait has been lost? How could elevation, how could evolution work like this? It'd be like elevation, like your ball rolling uphill, wouldn't it? Doesn't evolution just proceed? Does it ever retract? This is a complicated question.
It's so complicated. I feel like we're kind of a buzzkill today. We're like throwing all this stuff at you, but don't worry.
We're Avril Lavigne. Why you gotta be so complicated?
Okay, so what we want you to do is, can you think about a trait that has been lost, right? Something that has been lost in a species or in a clade. You can write on the slide with your text tool.
Why'd you have to go and make things so complicated? I see the way you
there we go.
Somebody
Yay! Super good. Lots of tails.
It's too early to have a song stuck in my head. Please.
Good.
Oh wait, that
It's a good song, so I'm not complaining, but still.
Good. Penguins. Yes. Eyes. Birds lacking teeth. Yes. And super weird and creepy. If you play around with the genetics of a chicken, you can get them to grow their teeth again. It's weird. Yeah. Okay. Well done. Yes.
Red hair color is becoming less frequent in humans. Well, I gotta say, in at least one.
Okay, well done. So traits can be lost. That's really important. And it doesn't mean then that they're not part of that tree anymore. It's just that there was a trait loss, right? Which complicates things quite a bit, because if you lose a trait, then if you're trying to classify things based on traits, it becomes really difficult, because how do you know that it used to have it, but now it doesn't? And that's one of the complexities of being an evolutionary biologist.
So this would be one of the cases where one of the rule sets that evolutionary biologists use is thinking about parsimony, right?
Right.
And this kind of breaks that rule.
So let's talk about trait loss, because penguins are kind of my thing, right?
Can we say it like Benedict
Right there.
Cumberbatch?
No.
Pow.
No. So penguins are amazing, and they don't fly, and they're birds, but they used to fly. Their common ancestor did fly, right? So they have trait loss, and so do quite a few other birds. So the ratites, so the ostriches and the emus and the little kiwis that are so cute and fluffy, they don't fly as well. And there are all sorts of questions about, does that mean that penguins are more closely related to ratites than they are to the flying birds? Is that possible? Yeah, it's totally possible, but is it likely? Now we have to talk about the ease with which traits can evolve and traits can be lost. So this is like evolutionary tree thinking 3.0. Because it turns out that trait loss is pretty common, and that trait gain or re-evolution of a complex trait is less likely. It's not impossible, but way less likely than something being lost multiple times. So what we can do is we can put these birds on some kind of tree. Now, we don't have the penguins, right? So we're just looking at the ratites. And what I'd love for you to do is take a look at this tree, understand that the common ancestor flies. This one right here flaps its wings and flies into the air. Put a stamp where the trait flight needs to have been lost if within this clade of flightless birds, the tinamou still flies. What? So, the tinamou still flies. Where does flight need to be lost? Okay.
I can't wait till I see the next tinamou.
Super good. Yeah. Good. Thank you down here, those that are doing the chicken. Well done.
The glorious chicken
The glorious chicken.
soaring majestically.
Yeah. Okay. So the idea is, remember, this whole parsimony, what is more likely? Flight is a complex thing. And so if this common ancestor evolves to lose flight early on, it means, it's not impossible, but it means that the Tinamu re-evolved a ridiculously complex trait, which is less likely than if it lost flight multiple times. Okay, so let's just imagine, and let's just say that the Tinamu, the trait for flight is maintained. Okay, it's the ancestral trait that goes the whole way along the tree, which means you cannot have flight loss along these branches. Okay, it's maintained here. It means that it then has to be lost in multiple places, right? Including at least here, but probably even a couple of times further up, because these are on completely different continents, right? But then here, here, and here for sure. Okay, at least, if not more times, in order for this to be maintained so that the Tinamu can continue to fly.
Just a question. Can all Tinamus fly?
Yes, all Tinamus
Okay.
can fly. So here's another way where you can say here, all of these are going to be flying, are going to be losing flight. And chickens can kind of, but they are definitely flightless birds. Okay. There we go. Independent losses of flight in order to resolve this tree. So, is this flightless bird a monophyletic group? And that's for you to play with as you learn all of these different terms and make connections between them. You can kind of work through that in order to be able to come up with an answer as you study for.
Yeah, I was
for your
doing air
test.
quotes around not monophyletic, but is flightless bird.
Yeah,
There should be some quotes around that.
flightless bird.
A monophyletic group.
Right.
I think you probably already have suspicions.
Yeah. Take it away, Smith.
2 seconds. So loss, evolution via loss of a complex trait via loss. But can complex traits be regained? Do we break Dolos Law, and what are the consequences? So when we talk about the evolution of flight, we have a vertebrate bias. We have a vertebrate bias to most things that we do. So we think birds and bats, and it's like, well, insects were the first group to evolve flight 350 million years ago. They've been flying for millions and millions of years by the time there were vertebrates that even considered it. And moving into that new niche space was considered to be a significant contribution to insect diversification. New niches, new opportunities for new species to subdivide and blah, blah, blah. But, however, there are multiple groups where winglessness has been observed. So for stick insects are one example where only 40% of stick insects are fully winged. And stick insect taxonomists and phylogenetic systematists or evolutionary biologists have been confused by trying to plot the simple trait of winged with wings or no wings. And they've had to ask this question: can flight be regained? So the first group to do this was a couple of whitings and some of their other associated colleagues who did this in Nature many, many moons ago. It doesn't seem that long to me, but you can see the plotting of with the colored boxes on the outside and the colors of the branch lengths. That their hypothesis is that the ancestor was winged, and then there was wing loss as you go from the top of the tree.
Right
kind
at
of
the
down.
first triangle.
So the ancestor was winged, and then wing loss. And then, as you keep kind of moving into the tree to those interior branches, you see these stars where it's like, oh, well, one group regained wings, and then some of that group lost it. And then more groups gained it, and then also lost it. It's this seems to be one group, and it's not alone. There's orbatid mites. There's a whole bunch of examples in evolution that you can come up with in terms of if you Google or Google Scholar trait, regaining complex trait, something like that. So how does that particular circumstance come about? This is something they're still talking about, and one hypothesis has to do with whether or not different genes, regulatory genes that are at the base of forming a wing, can be turned off so that the wing is not expressed, but the gene, the infrastructure to build the wing, is still there. And so then what it is essentially lying, it's like this
Lying dormant.
this nascent, you're kind of going through your coat and going, oh, look,
Mm-hmm.
I've got a solution to this problem. And my particular Swiss Army knife is that I can have wings.
And if it's laying dormant, remember that it's not subject to natural selection in a way that can maintain those genes.
So it couldn't happen for a long
It
time.
couldn't happen for a long time.
Because errors would
Right.
accumulate.
It's complicated. So somebody took a look at this and went, okay, yeah, that made, yes, we can resolve this tree. But what if instead of flight being regained, it was more about it being lost a few more times? And this kind of stresses you out a little bit.
It doesn't stress me. I don't
buy it.
I don't buy it. It's an
Okay.
alternative hypothesis for which I don't think there is the same amount of information.
So you can look at it both ways.
Supporting information.
Cool. So you can look at it both ways, right? You can say, okay, so it was gained a bunch of times, or it was lost a bunch more than a bunch of times. And these trees show similar relationships. They have different interpretations. So then you have to talk to the actual experts and go, which is more likely in these cases, right? Within the ecological context, within the genetic context, are these branches really short? And so could these genes have been maintained so that they could regain flight? Or are we talking about too long a time so that there would be a buildup of mutations and errors?
I like the question that was written on the screen.
What was that?
Why might you lose flight?
Nice.
So you could
expensive.
Google that. It's expensive to build these and maintain these wings, and think about two things. One of them, you can Google what happens on islands when species colonize islands, and the other is what happens if you want to start crawling under the leaf litter or under rocks.
Your wings kind of like drag you down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So we've thrown a bunch of words at you. Here's some homework or some help, it says midterm. Topic test. Studying. It's not a midterm. It's a topic test. So here's some things that can get you started, little tips and tricks for studying. We threw a whole bunch of words at you over the last couple of classes. Homology, convergent, paraphyletic, all of those things. Can you sort these things into two categories of like concepts, like groups? See if you can come up with ones that sort of go together more than the others, and I think it'll become really clear as you try to learn what these things mean. And then we have a tree for you. It's an uber complex tree. It's not friendly. It's hard. And we have, and we have a question that you can practice on and talk about and work together on to figure out what the answer is. Remember though, don't post the answers to things. Like we have you, don't annotate the answers to those slides as you come in to the games that we have at the beginning, because it ruins the possibility of others to be able to learn if they don't also struggle with coming up with the answer. So as we get closer to the topic test, we will engage with you on the discussion board and on the asynchronous tool that we're going to launch on Monday, and start talking about the answers as we get closer. But try not to kind of ruin the opportunities for other people to be able to understand and learn on their own. Okay.
Give chances to be wrong. We're over by a couple minutes, so
Take care.
remember those links about where to go tomorrow.
Yes. Bye.
Keep waving.